Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, Alaska's pipeline to the future, delivering oil today, sustaining operations for tomorrow, committed to safety, operating the 800-mile Trans-Alaska Pipeline since 1977.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 3rd of April now. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest watches, warnings, and advisories. As at this point, there are none across Alaska, but if there were, you'd know about it if you head to weather.gov/Alaska. And the Weather Info line is a way to get that information as well. 800-472-0391. Find us on Twitter under NWS Anchorage, NWS Fairbanks, or NWS Juneau. On Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska. We love to see your weather pictures as well. So not only can you get information in between the Alaska weather shows and the forecasts that you find online or from your NOAA Weather Radio, but you can participate in the rest of the story there on Facebook. So always a good way to communicate with us there. And on YouTube during the afternoon, you get your daily afternoon map briefing around 3:45, 4 o'clock. If you go to NWS Anchorage on YouTube, you'll be able to find that fairly easily, as well as some other interesting tidbits that we post from time to time. And then after the show, of course, you can find the entire broadcast of Alaska Weather, courtesy of our broadcast partner here at Alaska Public. Go to alaskapublic.org online, and on the right side of your screen, scroll down a little bit and you'll be able to see their video player. Or on YouTube again, you can search for AKWX TV, Alaska Weather for short. Here's what we see out there in the Bering right now. Several waves of low pressure, the main moisture channel here, along with the jet stream well south of Alaska. Notice in the last couple frames here of the western Pacific view, you can see kind of a little bit more moisture gathering across the eastern coast of Asia. So it'll be interesting to see how that interacts with the rest of the changes that we're seeing across southwest and western Alaska, as well as the changing jet stream that will allow some stormier weather to move in through southwest, south central, and eventually southeastern Alaska as we go through the weekend. So the weather pattern is changing as of this point. Now, as we look at the rest of mainland Alaska, you'll notice some pockets of rain there across the extreme south eastern parts of Alaska as we get into the afternoon hours. Most of what we were seeing was a frontal boundary just kind of creeping in here earlier today. With that, we're going to have another opportunity for some rainfall. This is organizing waves of low pressure across northern sections of the Gulf as we head into the next 24 to 48 hours, and probably going to change up South Central's weather and eventually help to bring in some snow showers across the interior as well. All of this is a little bit of a change from where we've been for, well, probably about 2 weeks in some cases there. Now for the corners of Alaska, let's say southeast and far west and southwest and even north, you may have seen some passing flurries and clouds from time to time, but for the bulk of the interior, really, the bulk of southern Alaska and really mostly southeast Alaska too, it has been a really dry and stable weather pattern for, again, about 14 days or so. So we've got a little bit of a change now. The trough in the upper atmosphere is moving. That's allowing the surface storms to get a little bit closer. And we've seen some pockets of rain here across the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, far western sections of the Seward Peninsula, and up north around Point Hope and Point Lay and around Atkasuk. I believe we had some light snow showers earlier this afternoon. Here's a frontal boundary now sitting right on top of southeastern Alaska. It doesn't have a lot of moisture to work with, so it doesn't seem like it's really cranking out a whole lot of rain for you. Did see a little bit there closer to some of the southern entrances. The next really big change that a lot of people are going to notice is the frontal boundary working in just south of Kodiak Island now. As it travels northward tonight, it will start to bring probably some rain and some breezes to Kodiak Island and more parts of the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. Clouds still slow to cover up a large part of southern Alaska around the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and the Mat-Su Valleys. Really haven't seen a whole lot of clouds pouring in just yet. Sure, some high, thin cirrus clouds from time to time, but that's about it. North of the central Aleutians, a 982 millibar low there. Still south and west of the Pribilofs. You can see it's going to stay mainly west tonight. That should put the Pribilofs on a little bit more of the colder side of the storm. Colder air starting to drop southward, and that makes a rain-snow mix a little bit more likely for the Pribilof Islands. 984 millibar low there north of Unalaska. That will keep some rain moving across Bristol Bay. Pockets of rain and snow across south central and mainly the western side of Prince William Sound tonight. If anything, looks like a lot of that will be slow to creep over the Kenai Peninsula. But as we head into late tonight and tomorrow, don't be surprised if you're in Anchorage or perhaps a little bit further north up in the Chugiak or the Matsu Valley. You start to see the signs of what will probably become snow as we head into the weekend. The frontal boundary across the Gulf of Alaska also working its way eastward. Notice we have high pressure here across British Columbia. Well, that pretty much drops out of the picture as we head into Friday. The front's moving into the eastern and northern Gulf, and that will start to bring in a better chance for rain and snow across more parts of the Panhandle. Prince William Sound, you're looking at an opportunity for snow showers there. That will mix the further south you go toward Homer and Seward and Kamishak Bay. And a little bit further northward into the Anchorage area. Rain by day, maybe some snow and rain by night. The road conditions are going to be changing whether you're driving up the Parks Highway, the Sterling Highway, or just heading down to Homer. Do be prepared for a change in those driving conditions. We've had a pretty dry stretch and a lot of things have cleared up. But if you are motivating around Alaska tomorrow and into Friday and Saturday, again, be prepared for some changes. Out to the west, the YK Delta is looking at some mixed precipitation, probably just rain and snow showers there. Into Norton Sound, pockets of snow there, and looking at some light snowfall around the western and central parts of the Brooks Range. By Saturday, we've got a low pressure system just south and east of Prince William Sound. That's going to put it in pretty good position to keep at least some scattering precipitation around south central and southeastern Alaska. We've got an onshore flow now across a large part of southeast. Another wave of low pressure well south of Sand Point, southwest of Kodiak. It's got warm and wet air here. The colder air is dropping southward. That will keep areas around the eastern chain and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula likely in areas with rain and snow, and probably looking at some light snow from the Kuskokwim Valley all the way across the mid-Yukon Valley, and some light snow across the northern parts of the coastal plain and into Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse out toward Kaktovik. Now, high pressure tries to regain ground fairly quickly. You can already see it forming there west of the Gulf of Anadyr. It's at 1,017 millibars. So we'll keep some low clouds across the ice edge from St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs, and probably some breezier conditions across the central chain. But right behind that, you can already see the formings of another storm working into the North Pacific and the far western sections of the Bering there. So we'll keep an eye on that, but it does look like there's another wave following this. So by perhaps late Sunday and into early Monday, we're getting another shot of storm energy that could also add some more wintry weather to at least southwest and south central Alaska, and southeast probably looking at a little bit more of an unstable pattern as we head into the next 3 to 5 days. For the interior, the dry weather will keep on coming for you, and you'll see brief interruptions it looks like, but probably some opportunities for some light snow. Looking at temperatures today across southeast, low to mid 40s in southeast today. Wow, 46 degrees around Gustavus, mid to upper 40s for Ketchikan and Annette and Hyder at 45. Juneau, lower 40s for you. Petersburg also enjoying milder temperatures. Out around Middleton Island, it made it to 41, but just across the ferry trip there to 40 degrees at Cordova, 32 in Valdez, 39 in Anchorage, 36 in Kenai. 40s for Homer, 30s in Seward, though, a little bit cooler on the eastern side. 39 in Talkeetna. Healy and Greeley were both in the 30s, with Tanana looking at temperatures closer to 30 degrees. Fairbanks was 36, 29 up around Eagle today. Fort Yukon at 18. Anaktuvik Pass made it to 10, with Arctic Village a little bit milder at 12. And temps were sub-zero for the Arctic coast. 2 below in Barrow, 3 below in Kaktovik. And it looked like Wainwright was about 1 below. Now, the Seward Peninsula had a little bit of a different story. The south side was milder and above freezing in Nome today, but Shishmaref, Kotzebue, areas around Kivalina were significantly cooler. Single digits in teens for you. Tin City was 6. 14 around Savunga with Emonic at 30. Unalakleet at 27, and Grayling, McGrath, I should say, 33 degrees there, with Grayling also in the 30s. Bethel was showing 40 by late afternoon. Southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay, anywhere from 37 to 47 degrees there from Dillingham to King Salmon. Lake Iliamna in the upper 30s, and the Pribilofs were in the mid-30s as well. The Alaska Peninsula, anywhere from the upper 30s to low 40s for most areas. Sandpoint was 37, Cold Bay and Falls Pass closer to 40 degrees. Port Heiden around 46. 43 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and 36 around Shemya, with Adak and Atka both at 41. Overnight low temperatures will be fairly mild south of McGrath toward Bristol Bay. Now you'll notice a big jump in temperatures here from McGrath at 14 to King Salmon at 34. 20 degrees right here, but that's all because that storm and the frontal boundary are trying to work that warm air farther and farther north. South Central's looking at 20s and 30s, 36 in Kodiak, mid-30s for the central and western chain. Southeast should be mild too. Upper 20s and lower 30s, anywhere from 32 in Sitka, 34 around Ketchikan, and 26 in Juneau. With the interior, expecting temps in the low to mid-teens. Fairbanks at 13, Tanana near 8, Galena around 12. Ambler and Vettles anywhere from the single digits to low teens. The Arctic coast still sub-zero, 2 below in Barrow. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse about 13 below tonight. High temperatures tomorrow might make it to 0 if you're on the Arctic coast. Beaufort Seacoast still looking a little bit cool around Prudhoe Bay, about 2 below. 30s and 40s for a large part of the interior. You can see that freezing lines cutting through Fort Yukon and wrapping down to just about Bethel here. Everything north of that should be sub-freezing, but look at the heat trying to build in on the south side of that. Not only does that bring warmth, but it is bringing moisture. So again, you will have an opportunity for some mixed precipitation for south central and southwest and southeast. Also warming into the mid-40s around Ketchikan and Annette and Heidelberg, all the way up toward Juneau in the lower 40s tomorrow afternoon. So not a bad Friday there temperature-wise. Now flying weather, we're going to see some changes in the passes too. We'll start to see those first across the western Alaska range. So Rainy Pass, probably further south, also on the windward side of the storm for the eastern Kenai Peninsula. So anything from, let's say Whittier southward down toward the tip of the Kenai, you're probably looking at IFR conditions developing throughout the afternoon. Large part of Prince William Sound will be under MVFR conditions, but you can see for southeast if you're flying, MVFR probably doesn't start until the afternoon for areas off the coast. So you're probably going to be okay up and down through southeast. And IFR conditions all the way from Cape Newenham all the way down toward the eastern part of the chain. Otherwise, MVFR or better. For most of the interior, it looks to still be VFR. And we'll say that true for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass tomorrow. VFR conditions and good flying north, and then we start to see some changes again across Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. MVFR expected through most of the day. We'll be heading over toward MVFR as the day goes on through Rainy Pass. And it doesn't look like turbulence is going to be a huge factor there for Windy Pass tomorrow, but probably do expect some isolated chop from time to time as that storm's moving in. VFR to MVFR developing. Same goes for Isabel Pass. We expect MVFR conditions by the end of tomorrow. Tanita Pass, MVFR by the afternoon. Porter's Pass probably there through most of the day, and the winds will be picking up in Turnagain Arm coming out of the west. Do expect some chop to develop there, and that will be increasing heading into the weekend. Chilkoot and White Pass right now, VFR conditions there. Freezing levels, really no major change of the surface freezing line. You can see that level is holding fairly close to the Pribilofs right now and across the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. And the elevated freezing levels anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 feet aloft. And again, that's kind of creeping a little bit further north with the next wave south of the Kodiak Island area and grabbing some of that warmth and lifting it northward. The icing potential following the frontal boundary tomorrow, anywhere below 12,000 and above 4,000. That pretty much encompasses this entire region here. Of course, that will change a little bit depending on where you are. Might be a little bit higher or lower, but generally speaking, 4,000 to 12,000 feet is where you're going to run into an opportunity for light to maybe isolated moderate icing. The jet stream shows the main core of the jet is still well south of Alaska, but we've got a decent dip in that jet stream south and west of the mainland. With that, we've got a lot of moisture forming and moving northward into south central Alaska, a little bit of a ridge to the east, and some cooler air still kind of being locked up north of the Bering Strait. So a little bit of a different pattern than what we were talking about earlier this week. A trough at 9,000 feet and clearly defined here across the west. You've got a north and westerly flow coming into the chain around 50 knots in some cases on the west side of the low. On the Gulf side, you're looking at more of a south and southwesterly flow. It really slows down as you get into the interior, only about 10 to 15 knots or so. A southwesterly wind coming into southeast Alaska at 25 to 35 knots, and the Arctic coast looking at 20 knots or so, wrapping around two weather patterns, low and high pressure there, kind of duking it out is what I'm trying to say. Across the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seacoast, you'll notice both areas looking at about 20-knot winds. Now at 3,000 feet, that trough is oriented just a little bit differently, a little bit more to the east and then slanted back to the south and west as you get out of Bristol Bay. The northerly flows coming over the St. Matthew Island waters around 30 knots or so, 35-knot winds for the central and western chain, south and westerly winds working through the Gulf, and wind speeds just kind of throwing the brakes once they get into southeast and over some of the higher terrain. In fact, we've got a northerly flow still trying to cut into places like the Lynn Canal and Haines and Skagway, only about 5 knots coming in there, with southeasterly winds working through the interior, about 10 to 15 knots coming in from south to southeast around Fairbanks. Again, fairly light winds and more of an east and northeasterly curve coming into Norton Sound, also pretty light, around 20 knots. So turbulence, probably the best chance for turbulence to develop tomorrow will be as that low pressure system's working up over Kodiak Island and starting to run into some of the terrain, working over the kind of the squeezing effect as it runs over the Barren Islands there. So as that flow is constricted and running into different levels of wind, the shear there below 6,000 feet, and probably see occasional moderate. Looking for some light chop along that frontal boundary just offshore of southeast, probably developing more and more over the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound, and up and down the west coast from the Bering Strait all the way to the YK Delta, the farthest western tip of that anyway, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew, St. Lawrence, the Pribilofs, and from Unalaska all the way out toward almost Kiska, below 6,000 feet. Expect at least some light chop with those northerly winds picking up a little bit more. And of course, when we come back, we'll talk about the sea ice edge and the rest of your marine forecasts. Stick around, there's more.
The Martian Opposition of 2014.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Marlene Hidalgo, science teacher from Miami, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory. We get to celebrate something really special next week.
That's right, Dean. The red planet Mars will be at opposition.
And when Mars is at opposition, it's closest to us and at its biggest and brightest.
When objects are closer and brighter, this makes them much better for viewing.
So let's talk about the upcoming opposition of Mars and why some oppositions are better than others. Let's show you.
Mars has fascinated astronomers for centuries. Even the sky watchers of antiquity were mesmerized by the peculiar movement, brightness, and color changes of Mars.
Every 26 months or so, Mars goes from a pale orangish yellow to a bright orangish red. Mars got its name because its red color reminded the ancient Romans of blood, war, and violence. So they named it after their god of war.
The ancient Greeks gave the red planet the name Ares, the name of the Greek god of war. And the Babylonians named it Nergal after their god of pestilence and death.
So every 26 months, the brightening of Mars reminded people of this celestial connection with their god of war. And they came to expect the unleashing of war, revolutions, disaster, and death. Even the symbol for Mars is the stylized Roman sword and shield.
But why does Mars change color, size, and brightness every 26 months? If we view our solar system from high above the sun, we can see the orbits of both Earth and Mars. Earth takes a little more than 365 days to orbit the sun, while Mars takes almost 687 days. When Mars and Earth are at their closest to each other, Mars is said to be at opposition. When a planet is at opposition, it's exactly on the opposite side of the sky from the sun.
The tricky part about Martian oppositions is that sometimes Mars is much closer at some oppositions than at others. For example, the Martian opposition of August 2003 was one of the closest ones ever, where Earth and Mars were only 34.6 million miles apart.
Compare that to the opposition of March 2012, when Mars was a whopping 62.6 million miles from Earth. The reason that Mars's distance varies so much is because of the shape of Mars's orbit. Johannes Kepler demonstrated that planetary orbits are not perfect circles, but a shape called an ellipse. Mars's orbit is more elliptical than Earth's, so there are times when Mars is much closer to the Sun than at others. When a planet is at its closest to the Sun, we call that perihelion. The perihelion point for Mars lies in the constellation Aquarius. The point when a planet is farthest from the Sun is called aphelion, and for Mars, that point is in Leo the Lion. Perihelion and aphelion are on opposite sides of a planet's orbit, and as a result are on opposite sides of the sky. So, if you look at the zodiac, what constellation is on the opposite side of the sky from Leo the Lion? Ta-da! It's Aquarius. So, if the Sun is in Leo and Mars is in Aquarius, you get a close and bright opposition. But switch it around, and if the Sun is in Aquarius and Mars is in Leo, you get a distant and faint opposition.
During the Martian opposition of 1956, Mars was extremely close and bright. This happened in September, when the Sun was in Leo and Mars was in Aquarius. The opposition of 1877, when Phobos and Deimos were discovered, also happened in September, and again, Mars was in Aquarius.
On the other hand, the Martian opposition of 1997 wasn't very impressive. It happened in March when the Sun was in Aquarius and Mars was in Leo. The same thing happened in March 2012. Things are getting better though. Next week on April 8th, Mars will be in Virgo and the Sun will be in Pisces. They're both one constellation over, so it's not quite as bad.
Each time we go around, the oppositions will get better and better. Then in late July 2018, we'll get the best view of Mars we've had since 2003.
So check out Mars right after sunset next week as you
Keep looking up.
All right, you got a sneak peek of the ice edge there that you can always find on our website, pafc.arh.noaa.gov/ice.php, or here's the easy way, you ready? weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Either way, it'll get you to the same place. You can get these images, or at least this shape, to drop on your map and analyze the ice forecast as our Sea Ice program analyzes it 3 times during the week and soon to be more. Out across the Pribilofs, you can see the ice edge is well away. It's still covering up the water around the St. Matthew Island region, as well as Nunivak Island and parts of Kuskokwim Bay. But we have it on good authority from the experts there at the Sea Ice program. The edge is eroding and working its way northward. And again, the ice there in Cook Inlet also eroding. You can see just a thin sliver there across the western side of the northern inlet. So, boy, going, and almost gone there. Again, a lot more anytime by heading to weather.gov/Anchorage. And on the left side of your screen, look for Sea Ice or Ice Desk. And you'll be able to see not only images like this, but some high-resolution satellite pictures that our ICE program experts post on a regular basis as well. It gives you an even finer, close-in picture from some of the polar orbiting satellites. Just fantastic stuff. You could look at it all day if you're somebody like me, and hopefully you can find something interesting there on our website as well. If you can't find it, let me know. I'll help you out. Here's a look at southeast now for the marine forecast heading into Friday. A southeasterly flow coming up the coastal region around 20 to 25 knots, 5 to 7 foot seas around Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather. Also about the same kind of seas there on the southern entrances there. Across the southern inner waterways, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Very light, maybe even variable flow across the Lynn Canal tomorrow. 2-foot seas. As you get into Saturday, the southeasterlies continue for most of the coastal areas. You get a little bit of a shift here across the Dixon entrance, around 15 knots with a 9-foot sea. 20-knot wind still starting to work its way up through the inner channels there. Around 4-foot seas are expected, and now the Lynn Canal winds are back, 15-knot winds with a 3-foot sea on Saturday. Now, this should be Friday, so pay no attention to the banner. That's my fault. A northeasterly wind coming down the Cook Inlet, anywhere from 15 to 35 knots west of the Barren Islands. So this will be some of the faster winds. Also, easterlies coming in east of the Barren Islands, 35-knot winds there as well. 13-foot seas in the western Gulf, 10-foot seas outside of Prince William Sound, easterlies inside Prince William Sound, a southerly flow on the eastern side of Kodiak Island all the way down to Marmot Bay. 25 knots with a 9-foot sea, 30-knot winds inside Chillicothe Strait. On Saturday, northeasterlies coming down the western Gulf. Look for the westerly flow cutting off of Kodiak Island. 15-knot winds now diminishing inside Chillicothe Strait. We'll keep that north and northeasterly flow through the Cook Inlet around 10 to 15 knots, and seas anywhere from 2 to 5 feet all the way down the inlet to Chillicothe Strait, and seas in the western Gulf anywhere from 8 to 9 feet, 3 feet inside of Prince William Sound, but you'll have a 20-knot wind from the north and east, so probably a little choppy out there. Easterlies inside Bristol Bay, around 20 knots with a 3-foot sea. South and southwesterly winds on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, around 20 knots with a southeasterly wind. North of Cold Bay on the Bering side, 5-foot seas are expected Friday. More of a variable flow from Prince William Sound, or Bristol Bay, around 10 knots with a pretty flat sea there, and variable flow south of Chignik and southwest of Kodiak Island. Northeasterlies south of Sand Point with a 10-foot sea. Northerlies as you get north of Cold Bay again continue with a 7-foot sea on Saturday. For the Aleutians, northerly winds pretty much rule the day on Friday from 30 to 35 knots. You'll see seas really low north of Unalaska around 10 to 14 feet, and then 15-foot seas out toward Adak, and 15 to 16-foot seas across the west. And once we get into Saturday, a little bit of a shift here, 12 to 13-foot seas from the north. Still looking at a westerly flow south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. Notice the shift out here across the west, anywhere from Kiska west to Attu, more of a southwesterly flow developing in the wake of that northerly flow moving east, and now we've got a little bit of a ridge shaping up here, and the storm's still out to the west by Saturday. So you'll get into that kind of that return flow already by Saturday afternoon with a 9-foot sea way out in the west. Across the west coast now, a northerly wind coming down out of the Bering Strait northeasterlies out of Kuskokwim Bay. And we're looking at freezing spray south of that ice edge, so that will continue to be a threat. Some of that could be heavy as well. Northerlies around the Pribilofs with an 11-foot sea on Friday. As you get into Saturday, that diminishes somewhat. The wind speeds stay about the same. The seas should drop off a little bit. 3-foot seas outside of Kuskokwim Bay and around St. Matthew Island waters now. And again, we're still watching for freezing spray. On Friday, across the Arctic coast, an easterly wind from Prudhoe Bay east toward Kaktovik around 20 to 25 knots. The winds will be a little lighter across Barrow all the way out toward Point Ley, and then northerlies are back through the Chukchi Seacoast into Kotzebue Sound, 20 to 25 knots. By Saturday, more of an onshore push as the next wave of colder air tries to work in, 10 to 15 knots there with a westerly flow north of Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik, and the winds stay up inside Kotzebue Sound from the north at 25 knots. Recapping tonight's weather now, colder air is trying to work in from the west coast and into southwestern Alaska. We already have a frontal boundary working in from the Gulf, and this will add a little bit more lift, rain, and some rain and snow mix across some parts of the southern Alaska range and maybe even the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound. Southeastern Alaska might pick up a couple pockets of snow showers there. Most of that may be around Hyder and points south. High pressure is holding firm right now and keeping things pretty still and quiet across the Lynn Canal. But things are changing there. You can see some snow showers around Denali. As we get into Friday, expect to see a little bit of a change as we watch that weather front move northward across south central Alaska. Rain and snow will develop as we go through Friday, and many areas will be looking at a return to winter driving conditions if you're on the road system. Plan for more of that as we head into Saturday. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.